The Viking Age did not emerge suddenly, nor did it begin with a single dramatic event. It was the outcome of forces that had been building slowly within Scandinavia for generations. Long before Viking ships appeared along the coasts of Britain, Ireland, or Francia, the societies that produced them were already under strain. Environmental limits, social structures, and cultural expectations combined to create a world in which outward movement became not merely attractive, but necessary. To understand why the Vikings expanded so aggressively across Europe, we must begin not with the raids, but with life at home. Early medieval Scandinavia was a demanding environment. Much of Norway, Sweden, and parts of Denmark were dominated by mountains, forests, wetlands, and rocky terrain. Fertile land existed, but it was scarce and unevenly distributed. Arable soil was concentrated in narrow coastal plains, river valleys, and pockets of lowland that could support farming. Even there, the soil was often thin, and yields were unpredictable. The agricultural year was short. Winters were long, dark, and severe. Growing seasons could be disrupted by cold summers, early frosts, or excessive rain. Archaeological evidence from pollen analysis and settlement patterns shows that the Viking-era farmers practiced mixed agriculture, combining grain cultivation with livestock husbandry, precisely because neither was reliable on its own. Livestock represented wealth, food security, and status. Cattle, sheep, and pigs provided meat, dairy, hides, and labor. But livestock were vulnerable to harsh winters. A single season of heavy snow or prolonged cold could wipe out herds that had taken years to build. When that happened, recovery was slow, if it was possible at all. In this environment, survival required careful balance. There was little surplus and almost no margin for failure. Unlike the river valleys of southern Europe, Scandinavia offered no vast agricultural frontiers waiting to be settled. Land could be worked, but it could not be easily expanded. As population slowly increased during the early Middle Ages, pressure intensified. Farms could not simply be divided endlessly. A holding that supported one household could not sustain two without quickly losing viability. Each generation faced this same problem. Too many people competing for too little land. This pressure shaped the structure of Viking society. Land was not merely an economic resource, it was the foundation of independence, authority, and identity. Ownership of land allowed a man to support a family, participate in local assemblies, and defend his honor. Without land, a man's position in society was sharply diminished. While customs varied across regions, a common pattern emerged. A single heir inherited the primary farm. Often the eldest son received the land, livestock, and the household authority. Younger sons received far less, sometimes movable goods, sometimes weapons, and sometimes nothing that could sustain an independent life. Old Norse law codes and later medieval Scandinavian legal traditions preserve echoes of this system. They emphasize household authority, property rights, and the importance of landholding in determining legal standing. Without land, a man had fewer rights, fewer protections, and fewer prospects. For younger sons, remaining at home often meant permanent dependence. They might work their brother's land, serve as retainers to wealthier men, or attach themselves to chieftains. But dependence carried social stigma in a culture that prized autonomy and self-sufficiency. A man who could not stand on his own was vulnerable, not only economically, but socially and legally. Marriage further complicated these matters. Establishing a household required resources. Without land or wealth, a man's chances of marrying were limited. This created a growing class of young men with few prospects and little to lose. Honor intensified these pressures. Viking society placed immense importance on reputation, which governed everything, from alliances to legal outcomes. A man's honor was public, fragile, and constantly tested. Insults demanded response. Weakness invited challenge. Success brought protection and prestige. Literary sources, including the later Icelandic sagas, preserve a culture deeply concerned with memory and legacy. While these texts were written centuries later, they reflect earlier values that archaeology and contemporary accounts support. What mattered was not merely living, but being remembered. Skaldic poetry celebrated action, risk, and success beyond the familiar world. Wealth gained abroad was admired. Travel itself became a marker of status. Runestones across Sweden commemorate men who went west or died abroad, emphasizing movement and achievement rather than domestic stability. In this cultural framework, remaining at home without land, status, or prospects was not neutral. It was a form of failure. Ambition was not discouraged, it was expected. Risk was not reckless, it was respectable. The sea offered an escape from these constraints. Scandinavia's geography encouraged maritime activity. Long coastlines, fjords, and islands made seafaring a practical necessity long before it became a tool of expansion. Fishing, coastal trade, and local transport were part of everyday life. Over time, this experience produced a population comfortable with boats, navigation, and the rhythms of the sea. More important than the technical details of shipbuilding was what seafaring enabled. Ships provided mobility in a world where land-based expansion was blocked. They allowed young men without inheritance to seek opportunity. They offered distance from local hierarchies and the chance to redefine social standing through success abroad. This outward movement was informed by experience. Long before the era of large-scale raiding, Scandinavian traders were already active across the Baltic Sea and across the river networks of Eastern Europe. These routes connected Northern Europe to Byzantium and the Islamic world. Abbasid silver coins, found in Scandinavian treasure hoards, testify to the scale of this trade. Trade brought wealth, but it also brought knowledge. Traders learned the geography of Europe's coastlines and river systems. They encountered foreign settlements, political structures, and defenses. They saw where authority was strong and where it was weak. Monasteries, ports, and market towns stood out as wealthy yet vulnerable. Many were isolated, lightly defended, and rich in movable goods. When raiding began, it followed routes that were already familiar. Viking attacks were not random eruptions of violence. They were targeted actions informed by observation and experience. Religion further reduced the barriers to expansion. Viking belief systems did not emphasize avoidance of danger or the sanctity of peace. Instead, they framed courage, action, and reputation as virtues. Fate was believed to be unavoidable. What mattered was how one rose to meet it. Death in pursuit of honor was not tragic in the same way it was for Christian societies. It was meaningful. Remembrance after death, through story, song, and memorial, was deeply valued. These beliefs diminished fear and elevated risk-taking. Where other societies hesitated, the Viking warriors advanced. By the late 8th century, all of these forces had aligned. A growing population, constrained by limited land. Inheritance systems that excluded many from prosperity. A culture that rewarded reputation over security. The means to travel widely. Knowledge gained through trade. Beliefs that sanctified risk. The result was not sudden or unpredictable. It was inevitable. When opportunities appeared beyond Scandinavia's shores, they were seized. What began as seasonal raiding expanded into overwintering, settlement, and eventually conquest. Temporary camps became permanent communities. Loose warbands evolved into organized armies. England, divided and wealthy, would soon become one of the central arenas of this expansion. But it was not unique. Similar processes unfolded across Ireland, Francia, the Baltic, and the river systems of Eastern Europe. The Viking Age was not confined to one region. It was a continental transformation. The Vikings did not leave home because they were uniquely violent or inherently destructive. They left because their society generated pressure without providing sufficient release. Expansion was not a deviation from their world. It was a consequence of it. The Viking Age was not an accident of history. It was the outcome of systems working exactly as they were designed to work, until their effects spilled far beyond Scandinavia itself. What drove the Vikings outward was not a single moment of violence, nor a sudden hunger for conquest. It was pressure. Slow, relentless, and unresolved. A world that produced more ambition than it could contain, more men than it could settle, and more energy than it could absorb. When the sea opened as a path, that pressure found its release. The result was not a brief eruption, but a tide that would return again and again, reshaping coasts, kingdoms, and the peoples of Northern Europe. Thank you for joining me today on History Imperium. Please be sure to like, subscribe, and comment about what you would like to see next. I really appreciate your feedback as it helps me to improve the channel and to provide you with the best experience possible. Keep learning about the past, and as always, I will see you in the next one.